Okay, so I've got the whatever sound deadening insulation all chipped off. Definitely a safety glasses required task. It wasn't as sticky and gooey as the front sections were. This one was more of like breaking tile up. It just pretty much is shot all over the place. So wire wheeled it, scuffed it up all good, and put the POR on top of that. And then I guess just for my future reference, there's these two holes here that just have a piece of tape over them, and they go straight into the subframe. So probably what I'll end up doing is whenever I fog that waxy, whatever, anti-corrosion stuff in the subframe after the car is painted, hopefully I will remember that, because that would be an excellent point to snake that tool into. I am pleased to announce, though, that having stripped something off of this car, I didn't find rust this time. Just kidding, bold-faced lie, rust. So if anybody tells you that they have a 280Z that's never been restored or painted or anything, and they tell you it doesn't have any rust, either they're ignorant to it because they haven't really dug into it real, super far, or the car never has seen the light of day, or, I don't know, trying to pull the wool over your eyes or something, because I have never imagined that a car would rust like these things do. And so I guess it was getting water in back here somehow, and the reason I didn't catch that rust hole whenever I did the underside of the car is because it's inside the subframe. So there you can see that's the other side of it where all that crud is. And then there was another rust hole right there. And I didn't catch that one for the same reason, because there is a section of the subframe that runs right across here. So that is great. But the thing that has been nice about doing all the rust repair on this car is I'm really not freaked out by it anymore. Found that a little irritated that I have to deal with it, but I know that is not going to be the biggest deal at all to fix. I mean, I'll probably, take an hour or two, just zip it out with the plasma cutter, cut a little piece, magnet to hold it, tack it in, and be done. got the piece cut out. I used the plasma cutter to get the bulk of it out. So that was the inside of the subframe, which is pretty crusty looking. I got the new patch in there, which is 16 gauge, like I did pretty much all the other patches in the floorboard. Thicker than the stock sheet metal, but it's what was available. So I got it centered up in there pretty good. I used the die grinder to go ahead and shape it out to the shape it needed to be. And what, at least the way I've been doing it, seems to be pretty easy, is I'll make my patch the size it needs to be, trace it in Sharpie, and then cut out the hole instead of cutting the hole and trying to make the patch fit. This way just seems to be a lot easier. And then, you know, you just massage the two however you need to get them to fit. So now I just got to get that tacked in there, and I got the compressed air ready to cool it as I go so this thing doesn't warp into a pretzel. Alright, so there are the patches before I've hit them with the wire wheel or the sanding disc. That one's a little uglier. That one turned out pretty good though. I was hitting the back side here with compressed air because on the other side I actually started to burn the primer a little bit. So I was hitting the back side with compressed air on this one to try and prevent that, and it seems to have worked. Alright, so I'm just waiting for some wax and grease remover to dry, and then this will be ready for paint. So 2 areas of note is right there, and on this side seems to be another of the many places these cars like to rust. That side over there already has a coat of paint on it because it actually had a rust hole over there. So I cut out, patched, and painted that a few months ago, you know, when I was doing the rest of this. This one wasn't all the way through, so I left it for the time being. You see it's kind of gross, but anyways, I treated it with that same POR, I forget the name of it, whatever that first treatment step is. So that was the first step, the stuff to treat the rust, and then here's the actual paint. And wouldn't you know it, I didn't coat everything just because it kind of makes a mess. And full disclosure, I technically did it wrong. We'll just see how it works out. I wanted to be able to treat the metal, but part of the instructions for that is they want you to hose everything down with water to wash the stuff off. And I'm not real down with that, given how this car likes to rust and how many places there are to get water, like in all of these seams and whatnot. So I just kind of lightly, same kind of like how I did the rest of the car, I just kind of did a little light coating in the spots that needed it. And then I wiped it all down with a rag before it dried. Oh, there goes my light. And after that, I went ahead and then hit everything with the wax and grease remover. And actually, before I did the wax and grease remover, I even hit it with compressed air just to try and blow out anything that was stuck in the seams. Wiped everything down, hit it all with wax and grease remover. So that should all be pretty dandy. We'll just see how it works out. I mean, if all the paint falls off this thing, then we'll know that that wasn't the right way to do it. But anyways, we'll just see how it goes. I just wanted to try and treat the metal and not introduce any water into the car. This car is really going to be a good test for their products. You know, if this thing, you know, 10, 15, 20 years from now doesn't have any rust and doesn't have any paint coming off of it, that would be a real testament to their product. Because at this point, I've just about done the whole car in it. All right, just kind of some info about using this product from somebody who's used it quite a bit here on this project. Gloves, wear them. If you even think of opening this can and you don't have gloves on, you're gonna find it on your hands. Because this stuff just somehow gets everywhere. Now you notice the can has a lot more paint on it than it did earlier. What's worked in the past is taking a piece of saran wrap and putting it around the top and tucking it down to where it's just kind of barely touching the paint. So that way it kind of pushes the air, or it separates the air from the paint. I haven't opened this can in probably a year, so that was probably part of the problem. It had a big, thick, basically disc of dried paint. You can see that's some of the remnants of it. So I had to gingerly break that out, and I only barely shot paint all over the place. Oh yeah, safety glasses. You want safety glasses too. So safety glasses, gloves, and I would recommend buying this crap in the smallest container you can get it in. Or if you have to get it in the big like gallon jug, get a ton of small, whatever, quart size, pint size. I wouldn't get anything bigger than this and divvy it up between those, because you will, even with this jar, you know, doing this car project, this is actually the second jar I've gotten, but point is, it's incredibly difficult to use this stuff before it goes bad, especially if it's in a bigger container. So, but anyways, I'm gonna stir this up, see if it looks right, and if it does, then we'll go ahead and start painting. Well, I think that went pretty good. So pretty much the amount of paint I had, I could have used a little bit more, but I had just enough to get done everything that I really wanted to get done. And so this was the gloss. At some point I messed up, and I think it was under the car. I went from semi-gloss, and then I accidentally bought gloss, and then I just bought gloss from that point forward. So if this thing ever ends up on a lift someday, maybe you'll be able to tell, maybe not. But so everything here was the gloss, and it's not dry yet, but I absolutely love how this stuff turns out. It just makes everything look good. And I wasn't real precise with the paint lines there, because all of this is going to get covered up anyways. This is more of just to preserve the metal. And I made sure to get into all the seams really good. And before this is all said and done, I'll put that gray seam sealer on everything. And I wish it wasn't as dirty. I mean, I'll just have to clean it up at some point, but that's how this used to look. It's just got a bunch of dust on it right now, but cleaned up, it'll look really good. So I got everything back here. I mean, again, hitting all the seams, that was the main thing. Gollop along behind the taillights. There was a bunch of blasting media up behind this thing still, so that's all ground into the paint now. And then I used the last bit I had and just stuck it all down in the inside of the quarters, because both sides have had rust repair right in this area. So I went ahead and just piled a bunch of that down there in the seam, and then I just spread it around until I ran out. And so that one was dripping a bunch of paint out of it, so that one has a drain hole still, and this one might not. I might have to look into that because it hasn't dripped any paint, and I was hammering it in there pretty good. But yeah, there is that. I'm pretty happy and pleased about it. So I'm just gonna let it dry and call this done, and hopefully get out of here before I pass out from the paint fumes.